I essentially didn't like myself, and I felt very lonely and therefore misunderstood. If anyone is ever born again, I was born again on December the 15th, 2005 for sure, because my life really changed after that very quickly. People think contentment is having no responsibility and an easy life. That is not contentment, that's a fantasy.
So welcome back to the Next Level podcast. On today's episode, we have the one and only Mr. Rob Moore, a self-made millionaire, a professional property investor, a two-time world record holder. He's an author of not one or two, but 18 best-selling books on Amazon and multiple different platforms. He's got the biggest training platform in the company for property investors and multiple streams of income, and he's got probably one of the biggest podcasts in the UK called Disruptors, and he's interviewed people like Andrew Tate, Jake Paul, David Goggins, Matt Hancock, Stephen Bartlett, just to name a few. As you know, on this podcast, what I love to do is get to know the person behind the scenes, and if you don't know who Rob is, go and follow him on all social media channels. I'd love to welcome Rob to the show. Rob, great to have you on. Welcome to the Next Level podcast. I want to sort of explore yourself. So, a rebel with a cause, the disruptive entrepreneur. Where did that come from? When did that start?
I never really felt like I fit in at school. I was the fattest kid in my year at that age where you're maturing, hitting puberty, getting into girls, which for me was definitely one of the most confusing times in my life. And then ever since then, even though I lost the weight, I still felt like an outsider. And I just never, whatever anyone felt was normal and acceptable, I didn't. And I didn't want to be like everybody else. And so I guess for at least 15 years of my life, I was confused that I didn't feel like everybody else and I didn't want to fit in, but I didn't know where my place was. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this rebel with a cause. Like if anything is, if this studio was really tidy, when you're out there, I would want to mess it up a bit. Or if, like whenever we have board meetings and everyone gets serious, I always try and make them more jovial and fun. I just think that we're all unique and individual, but there's a lot of pressure for us not to be unique and individual, whether it's from society, governments, peer group, communities, networks. And also, progress doesn't come from being the same. Progress comes from being different and doing things differently. And I've always most admired the people that do things differently, whether it was Arnie with his bodybuilding and then his acting, or Elon Musk with the companies that he starts. And I guess it's my own way of, like, if you think about it, people think it's a risk to be different or to go against the mainstream, the rhetoric and the narrative. But I think it's a risk not to do that because nothing changes. And there's no point being a rebel without a cause, because what's the point in just shaking things up for the sake of it? Like, my show is called Disruptors, and at the end of every episode I ask people, what does disruptive mean to you? And shaking things up for the sake of it, all that does is create chaos and stress. Mm-hmm. But shaking things up for a cause and a mission, I think that is one of the fundamental, I can't say that it's the purpose of life and humanity, but it seems that evolution is adaptation and growth. And if you don't change things, it takes rebellion to change things. So if you don't change things, you don't have evolution and growth. Therefore, in the end, you die. And I think my soul feels a bit like that. Like my soul dies slowly if I'm just playing small and, you know, saluting to authority. Whereas if I'm shaking things up, whether it's my own life or a niche or an industry that I'm in, I feel alive. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could probably talk about this for a long time. And I know you've got all day. I know you like to go deep on these things. I think a lot of people are seeking happiness, but their definition of happiness doesn't serve them, or it's wrong. And they're seeking happiness by trying to find easier. You know, I want passive income. Mm-hmm. You know, I want less stress. I want freedom. You know, when you ask people these things that they want that make them happy, in a way they create these fantasies, because you can't have passive income without active income. You can't have recurring income without occurring income. Someone tried to tell me a week ago that, you know, I'm training for my first fight, as you know, at the moment. And someone basically tried to tell me that I could think my way fit. And I thought, what? So I can imagine myself sparring and imagine myself on the air bike and get fit that way. Come on, I've got to sweat. I've got to get on that air bike and get in the ring. So people are looking for easier and less responsibility, more order in their pursuit of happiness, when in reality, I believe that happiness comes after challenge and hardship and difficulty, and when you transcend a big meaty goal. And the more meaty the goal, the bigger the challenge, and the harder it is, and the more pain and pressure and tension and stress you go through in the pursuit of the goal, the more meaningful the goal is.
What about the fulfillment at the end?
What about it?
So people that obtain that goal, a lot of people will then go, I'm still not fulfilled. Would you be fulfilled at the end of your goal?
I think it depends on how you're defining your goal. So if there is this panacea destination of all destinations goal, mm-hmm. If you agree with my theory that a purpose of life is progress and evolution, of course you've created a fantasy that there is one goal where it all ends and you find eternal happiness. So if you put too much onus on the achievement of a goal, you create an unrealistic expectation of what that goal is, and you get there and life gives you the same lesson again, which is, all right, you've evolved and you've grown and you've transcended this goal, and maybe you're going to get some short-term happiness from that, but that'll soon dwindle. Because if the purpose of life was a destination, we'd all stop when we get there, but no one stops. Or if they do stop. Because people wonder, well, why is it when I achieve a goal that all of a sudden I need to set another goal? Or why do I often feel empty when I've achieved this goal? Because humanity would just stop. We would die out within generations, a few generations, if there was one level we could achieve and then that's it. Then what?
So what's the difference between yourself and other people that can hit that target of losing 9 kilograms, building up to a fight, or reaching a level of success that you have, the definition of success that some people may deem, compared to the average Joe?
Well, I think something that I feel like I've figured out, because I interviewed a very spiritual person recently, and she said that I am what was it, Harry, she called me? An attainment-driven person. So she was reading my personality. And she said, well, it would make sense that you think that struggle is part of growth and you get happiness through enduring struggle as an attainment and success-driven person. So I might just be seeing it in my own filter of the world, because other people may get happiness out of meditating 21 hours in the day, or just might actually be happy forever sitting and listening to the birds sing. For me, that would just be a slow, torturous, like living death. That's not something I could endure for very long. So something I feel like I've figured out as an apparent attainment and goal-driven individual is that if you don't set meaningful goals and challenges, you lack accountability. And if you lack accountability, you lack drive and direction. And if you lack drive and direction, you feel lost and empty and soulless and unfulfilled. So therefore, to feel fulfilled, to be on the journey of fulfillment, which is different to being fulfilled. To be on the journey of fulfillment, you need to set meaningful objectives and goals and visions. And the bigger and more meaningful they are, the harder and more challenging they are. And the harder and more challenging they are, the bigger your growth and the more fulfilling you feel as you achieve them. And then when you achieve them, you need to then set the next one. And I think people have this delusion that, well, when I make 10 grand a month, that'll be all the money I need. Well, with inflation, it won't at the moment. People think when I become a millionaire, I became a millionaire 14 years ago. And $1 million is nothing now. Like if people call me a millionaire now, I'm almost offended because I'm way more than a millionaire. Because $1 million is not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. 5% return on $1 million is 50 grand. 50 grand a year is hard to live on for most people now, especially in London. So I believe life presents us these paradoxes in every single situation. Like I'll give you an example, just a random one. These microphones. These are good quality audio, but Harry hates using microphones like this. He likes using lapels because there's two big barriers between us. And if we moved them out of the way, now there's no barrier between us.
Yep.
So I say to Harry, should we use these microphones because they look like we're doing a podcast and there's deeper, the bass is deeper on these. And Harry's like, no, because there's two big things in the way. Like if we were sitting down having a beer,
Yep.
or a chat, we wouldn't have these two big things in the way. We would just be looking at each other. So I think you can pick anything and it could have an upside and a downside. And, the downside of goals are once you've achieved them, then you can be left with this sense of, well, what's next? But if there was no what's next, then, like, think about in life what's scary. Surely it's more scary to get to a point and there's nothing left than to always know there's more. Because people are always confused. We're like, well, when is it ever enough? Well, if it was ever enough, then wouldn't that just be a really lackluster, boring, Groundhog Day kind of life?
And I think that's a lot to do with social media and a perception of it. Would you agree?
Give me some context. What do you mean?
So the perception that people look at on social media, which we'll get onto a bit later on, people are looking at, say, yourself on social media. You said already that £1 million is not enough, but a lot of people will say, I need £1 million, I need to hit £10,000 a month. But then they realise that the money's not actually what they want. The property's not what they want. The income's not what they want. It's something else. The goal has now changed. But like what you've just touched on there, they've got to go on that self-discovery, that journey to realise what is it that they want. I think there's a lot of people that are lost at the moment. But by hearing what you've just said there, it's touched home with a lot of people that are listening, by listening to your podcast as well.
Yeah. There's much to unpick in that. I, in a lot of ways, really dislike social media. And I use social media, and I'm careful that it doesn't use me. And it does use me, but I try and have it use me to its minimum, because it's a tool. It's like money. Money makes a great servant, but a terrible master. And ultimately, you can feel used in financial situations, or you can use money as a tool. So I try and look at things like social media and money as what they are, which are levers. They're tools. Like a hammer is a good lever for banging a nail in this piece of wood or pulling a nail out of this piece of wood. It does a much better job than your hand. In that regard, it's a very good lever. And you would think nothing twice about judging that hammer, but that hammer could also be used to smash someone's skull in. That hammer wouldn't be tried. There would be no judge and jury judging that hammer for smashing in someone's skull, because it's the person who wields the hammer and uses the tool to smash someone's skull in or pull out a nail or hammer in a nail. And social media and money are exactly the same, and people don't understand that. So the question I would ask people is, are you using money as an effective tool and lever for yourself, or is it using you? Are you using social media as an effective lever and tool for yourself, or is it using you? And I try my best now not to just aimlessly scroll on social media, because I start getting these feelings and emotions that I don't like, whether they are I'm being triggered by someone's content, or whether I start to compare. I start to judge my content with the amount of views, etc. And so in that regard, what I try and come back to is do I have a meaningful mission? So my vision is to help as many people on this planet get better financial education and knowledge. To me, that's very meaningful. Is it something I can grow into and always evolve through, and there is no end, and I can reach 100 people, then 1 million people, then 1 billion people, then 10 billion people one day? Yes. So it's never going to end. Therefore, it's not like a game of chess that's going to end and then I'm bored. It's meaningful, i.e. I think a lot of people are lost financially. You said a lot of people are lost. They're definitely lost financially right now. So I've got that overall guiding North Star, which puts meaning into why I'm earning money and why I'm using social media. And then enduring and being grateful for the challenges along the way. So a mentor and friend of mine has this saying, which I've nicked, but I give him the credit, which is, in every stressing hides a blessing. So in the pursuit of a meaningful mission or vision, you're going to have challenges along the way. And every single one of those challenges can be a blessing that can guide you towards your goal and your outcome. And so those 4 points I've made hopefully answer all the questions that were raised in your last statement.
They do. Yeah, no, they do. I don't want to bounce around too much because we're going to touch on the social media side of things. But take me back to 15th of December 2005.
Yeah, so on the 15th of December 2005, I was working for my dad in his pub. And my dad had had pubs and bars and clubs for pretty much all of his adult life. And he was, like, when people say a hustler or a grinder now, that phrase was, to me, felt like it was invented by my dad. When his back was against the wall and things were really hard, he would always find a way. And he'd made a load of money and gone bust and made a load of money and up and down. And I'd observed this journey from age 6. And he'd got me working in his pub age 6. And I preferred working behind the bar than I did going to school. And so maybe the seeds of the rebel with a cause and the entrepreneur in me, maybe they were planted then. But then you go to school And at GCSE, you've got to learn the 9 subjects that they make you learn. And then you recite them so you can memorize them, so you can be judged in exams on whether you're smart or stupid based on whether you could recite, memorize and recall the subjects that they wanted you to memorize and recall. And that never sat comfortably with me, and I didn't know why. There was no lateral thinking, common sense, independence and freedom of thought, discussion and debate and challenging norms. There was none of that. And there was always something inside me that needed more than just reciting the parable of a sower to get. I got 98% in religious studies. Most people don't know that. I wouldn't regard myself as a religious person, but it was just pretty easy to read and memorize the parable of a sower, or whatever parable, the small St. John's part of the Bible. That didn't actually make me want to learn more about the Bible. It put me off wanting to learn more about religion, and there's a lot to learn in religion. So school put me off some very important subjects. So I did my GCSEs and A-levels and went to university and got a degree, because apparently that's what smart people do, and apparently you're stupid if you don't. And I felt very suffocated. And I left university because I got my degree. My mum phoned me up and she said, maybe you could come back and work at the pub for a few weeks, because I think there's something up with Dad. I'm not sure what. And I was thinking about going to Australia to start to be an architect. And I said, all right, I'll come back and work for a few weeks. And that was 4 years. And then on that date, my dad had a massive nervous breakdown in his pub in front of all of his customers, got beaten up and arrested and sectioned by the police in front of me, my mum and my sister. They locked him away in Ward 5 of Peterborough District Hospital, which is the sort of, I guess, the mental health ward. Yeah, and I went through intense shame and feeling very useless and helpless and weak because I couldn't do anything about it. I just froze. And I was financially dependent on my parents at, nearly 26 years old, which is embarrassing. But I would regard that was the first day of my life. I wouldn't regard that January the 4th, 1979 was the first day of my life. If anyone is ever born again, I was born again on December the 15th, 2005 for sure, because my life really changed after that very quickly.
So it lit the fire in your belly again?
Yeah, I suppose. Caused me enough pain to take life seriously. Yeah. Because sometimes things aren't quite bad enough or comfortable enough. And when things decay very slowly, it's hard to see. But when everything goes up in flames in front of you, it's not. So in many ways, I said about the paradox of these microphones. Well, December the 15th, 2005 to date was the worst and best day in my life. It's a paradox because seeing what happened to my dad was the worst day of my life, but it was the catalyst and the motivation for everything. So you could argue it was the best.
And what happened next?
Well, a lot of things happened next. I went to a property networking event, met my business partner. We're still business partners today. I think he said now, I think we have 370 property rental units now that we own. I always have to check with him, get it right. He likes me to get it exactly right. I think I heard him say 370. I've been telling people it's 360 or 340. It's about 370. we have 1,350 tenants in our management company. We have the biggest property training business in the UK, Progressive Property. I've written or co-written 18 books. I've got Disruptors, which is one of the biggest podcasts in the world. I broke the world record for the longest public speech. I got out of 100 grand debt within 1 year, and I made my first million by age 31. I'm now 44. I don't know how much money we've made. It's in the hundreds of millions. And we've kept a fair bit of that as well, because people can make $1 million and spend $1 million. Yeah. So yeah, things are very different now.
And I think that's all very impressive, and that really is. But I think what's more impressive, is how you and your mum and your dad and your whole family and your support network dealt with what your dad was going through at the time. Because you've done a podcast with your mum that I watched quite intensely, and the foundation that you put in place, and the work that your mum's done since then. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah. I forgot about that. We did that in my living room, didn't we?
Yeah, you did, yeah.
So my mum is probably the most supportive woman I know, equally with my wife. And I set up my foundation at the same time as I wrote my book, Money. So my two most successful books in terms of sales would be Money and Life Leverage. And when I wrote Money, I that was around about that time was when my personal brand was really starting to build a head of steam and get known. And so I started to build up critics and haters and trolls, probably not for the first time, but of decent scale. And in all the research, because I wrote 250,000 words for the first original manuscript of that book, which is a lot of words because many books are now 30,000 words. And I did a massive amount of research for that book, probably 10 years worth. And, I learned the value, the purpose, the rules, the laws of money. And it seemed that when people got rich enough and successful enough, they would often start their own foundation or charity. And most people were either billionaires or in their 60s when they did it. And so I wanted to be a bit disruptive and do it a lot younger. So I wasn't a billionaire, and I wasn't in my 60s. So to silence the critics, I decided to give all the profits and proceeds of the book Money to my foundation. And I decided to start a foundation in my 30s, not in my 60s. Maybe back to disruptive or rebel with a cause. And so for many years now, I've been helping young and underprivileged people start meaningful businesses that change the world, or I've been supporting other charities through my foundation that I think does meaningful work. And my mum was absolutely desperate to help me with it, and she wanted to be the main trustee of it. In fact, she just went to see an organisation that we donated to, who help parents who've lost children. So one lady, she applied for some funding. We funded her to start a business because she lost her children when they were young. And so now she writes books and does content and material to help other parents who've lost children and deal with the trauma, which is, I think, an amazing thing to do. And in 4 weeks' time, I'm fighting someone who's a lot bigger than me. Like, you don't normally see this in fighting, where people fight people so much bigger. But we have £100,000 bet on, and it's looking likely that I might raise 130, maybe £140,000 just from doing this one, my first fight. And I think it gives it more meaning and more purpose. Write a best-selling book in the UK on money, but give all the money away to your foundation, which does good in the world. Go and have a white-collar fight, but instead of just fighting on an undercard and selling 100 tickets and raising 3.5 grand, be the main event and raise 130 130 or 140 grand. I broke the world record for the longest speech. We raised, I think, £120,000 doing that. So, yeah, charity and philanthropy and having a foundation and giving back. I think there's something inherent in human nature. I believe everybody gets good reward emotions for doing good and helping others. But it also gives your entrepreneurial work more meaning.
And it comes back to your mission. And again, what you just said there, excuse me, of knowing your mission, knowing where you're going. But it comes back to the 15th of December, 2005. It was the catalyst for yourself. Seeing your dad, knowing what he went through with a bipolar. What kind of impact did that have on yourself? Do you wish there was more information out there at the time for you? Knowing how to deal with it, you and your family.
I think the problem with wishing that something were different is you're wrestling with nature.
Mm-hmm.
If you fight nature, you will always lose. If you go with the flow of nature, then I think you can live a meaningful life. So I can't change the past. And so if I'm wishing something is different, that is me trying to fight how nature is. And I'm trying to learn in life to go with nature, not to fight nature. So no, I don't wish it were any different. My dad's still here. He's about to turn 80. He could have died at 48. So I'm pretty fucking grateful. I do think that more information and education and less stigma on bipolar, manic depression and mental health was needed. But I think that has started. I think there is a lot more now than there was when my dad had his nervous breakdown. Mm-hmm. And there was this sort of vulnerability movement, wasn't there? And there were times in the last decade where strong men were almost given permission to be vulnerable. And it's a bit different now, though, because we've got, people like Andrew Tate and, we've got a lot of rhetoric around discipline and control and strength and the opposite of vulnerability. But then when Brené Brown made vulnerability the whole buzzword, it's like we go through these extreme cycles. In reality, at times you should be strong and puff up your shoulders and you know. And then there are times where you got to go and see a fucking therapist and you got to go and talk about your emotions. It's not one or the other. So, yeah, a few years ago, I did a lot of content on mental health, inspired by a couple of things that were going on in my life and my dad. And I felt like it probably gave a lot of people that listened to my work permission to be honest and to not try and suppress and hide these emotions or pretend you're okay when you're not. But no one needs my permission, but sometimes they need to give themselves permission. I think if you listen to podcasts and you go a bit deeper than the mainstream media, I think you can find useful information and people out there that can help. Yeah.
Just tell me briefly, when you went and done the sort of insight into your content you've done on mental health, surrounding what you went through and what you went through with your family as well, because I've listened to it. I know how sort of deep you went in on that and how that impacted you, whether you went to therapy. Obviously, like, I know that you have. Tell me, give us some insight into what you was going through at that particular moment in time.
Well, I think fundamentally, first off, before I talk about myself, is how well do you know yourself? And do you know where you're what the underlying theme or filter of your emotions are. Maybe even where they originated from. Do you know why you react in certain ways and what your habitual responses are to the environment and maybe stressful situations or triggers? And the reason I ask these questions before I talk about me is I'm very different to you and Harry and Francis and Ganu, who's your videographer. Here's a spitting image of Francis.
I know
and
he
Ganu.
is.
Like, we all come from a different baseline.
Mm-hmm.
And I think self-awareness is knowing what that baseline and those filters and those triggers are and those responses. And they're not wrong, by the way. But asking yourself, do my reactions and behaviors, do they serve me or not? Or am I in control of them or not? And what I would do is I essentially didn't like myself. And it was because, and I felt very lonely, and I could be lonely around people, and therefore misunderstood, and therefore unvalued, unnoticed. And if I look at my life now with how I dress and the cars that I buy and how I run my businesses and my willingness to go on podcasts and things like that, I realize that this is me making up for all of that and taking advantage of, well, actually, I am admired and respected and noticed and valued and useful. And so at first off, I didn't know that about myself. And then through personal development and building a business, because actually therapy, personal development, and building a real business, these are the three elements that maybe have taught me the most about myself. And business has been the best educator by a mile, because business triggers all the emotions. And if you want to make a successful business, you have to manage and master those emotions. But those three things, therapy, business, and personal development, tens of thousands of hours on those, essentially helped me understand that I felt lonely because I was alone as a child. And being the fattest kid in my school exaggerated the feeling of loneliness when I was getting bullied, and then the desire to not be alone and to be valued when I was trying to fit in. And then losing all the way, I realized I didn't lose any of the emotional baggage. But I then learned that these are my voids, and your voids drive your values. And so we're all looking to fill our voids. And so how we're filling our voids is the pursuit of also our goals. So then I when I learned it about myself, I didn't like it about myself. And then I learned to like it about myself because I realized it was driving all of the successful things that we mentioned earlier. So really all it is for me is a journey of really understanding myself and my place in this world and the meaning of my life and life. And then trying to do the best with it that I can. And so if therapy helps, or personal development helps, or running a business helps, or challenging myself to breaking public speaking world records, or fighting in front of 1,700 people helps, I'll do it. But I would say to anyone listening, look at your life and ask yourself, if you were given 24 hours to live, would you look back and feel like you've lived a good and meaningful life, and it's a life that you're happy or proud of? And I can honestly say in the last 17 years, it would actually be a yes, which is even hard for me to say because I come from a place of not really liking myself. But the last 17 years, I've done a fuck of a lot. and I never give myself credit still, but I've done a fuck of a lot, and it would be a good innings. But that's because I've put a lot of focus and attention on it. So anyone listening, if your life was going to end in the next 24 hours, could you look back at your life and would you be satisfied or even proud of it? If so, then you've probably got good control of your life. If not, you need to change things. And then you need to work out what that meaningful life would look like and define it. Once you've defined it, you then need to work out what the habits are and the triggers that are blocking you from it. And then you need to go and try and address and improve those. And you might have to go back to childhood, or it might just be a small, simple change. It depends what your upbringing's been like.
And there was something that's great advice for anyone listening, by the way, 100%. So,
or watching.
Again, something that resonated with me massively, watching some of your podcasts on YouTube. If you was to look at the amount of success that you've had, again, it's all relative. The cars, the business, the money, or receiving a cuddle from your dad when he came out of being sectioned. What would mean more to you?
Oh, in terms of connection, my dad didn't dish out a compliment very often. And I remember when I got my helicopter license and I took him up and he told me the story that, because he was an aircraft engineer, but he actually wanted to be a pilot, but for various reasons he couldn't make being a pilot. And, I'm there flying him in a helicopter and he was like, I'm proud of you. And like, if I could bottle that emotion and just get it on tap or sell it, that would make a lot of money. So yeah, those things of course mean more than cars and watches and houses, but people underestimate cars and watches and houses, Lewis, and I'll tell you why. Because no one gives a fuck how I feel when I cuddle my dad, with that one cuddle I get from my dad, because it's personal to me.
Depends on the individual.
I think, all right, there might be a few people that could relate or might be able to vicariously experience something, but ultimately that's a personal thing that I experienced with my dad that no one else experienced. Mm-hmm. But I have a Lamborghini Aventador. It is one of the sexiest and it is the loudest supercar. And every single day people get wildly excited about that. And you pull up anywhere and the amount of people I say, get in the car, take a photo, and it makes their day. Yeah. So, the cars, really, honestly, there's two reasons I love cars. I don't love them because I'm a good driver, because I'm a shit driver. I don't love them because of all the maintenance. I have the fastest family saloon car, I believe, in the world. And Harry drives it for me. I don't even drive it. Porsche Panamera Turbo S. Oh, non-battery powered. I think one of the Teslas might be quicker. But they go wrong all the time. I've got 7 of them now. The insurance is crazy. I've got a Ferrari Testarossa. I haven't seen it forever because it's been in the garage in bits.
So because you're a shit driver.
Yeah. But like for me, the original reason I bought these cars was just the same reason I lost my weight. To go, hey, look, I'm a useful, valuable person. You notice me. Because who wants... Okay, some people don't like humans and could live on their own, but most people want connection from other people. And even people who don't like other humans, they still want connection from the people that they want to connect with. So for me, buying cars was to connect with other humans. And at first I didn't know that about myself. And I was like, it's because I am enjoying my money and I'm achieving goals. That came later. But everyone who buys a nice car, I think, no one buys a nice car and doesn't want anyone to see them in it. Otherwise, they wouldn't buy a nice car. So I know now why I started buying nice cars. And I I used to dislike that about myself because I used to think it was superficial. But it's not superficial. It's a sign that I am progressing in my life. But since that, because I don't do that so much anymore, I now buy cars as much for the pleasure for other people as I do for myself. So we were in Marbella, and we've not been able to have many holidays because, one, I don't like holidays and lockdowns and things like that. And my wife's been absolutely desperate for a holiday. And so we went to Marbella, and there was this Aston Martin DBS part, and she's not bothered about cars. And she was like, oh, I love that car. So I've probably about 3 days away from buying an Aston Martin DBS. It's going to be more unreliable than my daily driver. It's going to depreciate probably more. It's a £250,000 car. Mm-hmm. But to know that I can buy a car that is my wife's dream car fills me with a deep sense of satisfaction. And Harry will get to drive it when he comes and takes me on these, tours, and we go and do our podcast like we're doing today. And that feels really good. And some people say, oh, well, you shouldn't be material. Well, all right, you have a shitty Ford Fiesta for the rest of your life then. If everyone's honest, no one wants a shit car. They just haven't got the balls to admit that they want a nice one or 7 nice ones. Yeah. So watches, cars, properties, there's much more substance to them than people think. They're things that you can hand down. A watch like this, a Patek Philippe, this will outlive me. And maybe my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren will be passed this down, and maybe they'll remember Rob Moore, the first Moore that's ever lived. Became a multi-millionaire and built a huge real estate empire. And my daughter said to me yesterday, Daddy, are you an author? And I went, yeah. She's like, oh, wow. These things can last generations. Yeah.
So how do you blend, because I know you like that word, how do we blend contentment with ambition?
To know that as soon as we look for one pole without the other, we're going to create delusion and fantasy and volatility. So I'm sure everyone watching and listening has been infatuated with another human, whether it's someone they wanted to be in a relationship with or someone they pedestalized as a hero. And with enough time, when you get to know that human, you realize they have downsides too, because every human has downsides. In fact, many people infatuate over people, they get with them, and then they end up divorcing them. Well, that person didn't change. They just got to know them. So everything I believe in life has equal upsides and downsides, and it has these poles. You cannot have a magnet with just a plus and not a minus. And so the drive to growth and betterment and attainment and achievement and success and progress and evolution will never go away because it's inbuilt within human. It's one of the poles, and then the other pole are the reward emotions for that, for achieving that, like elation, contentment, fulfillment. And so you only get fulfillment and contentment, I believe, because people think contentment is having no responsibility and an easy life. That is not contentment. That's a fantasy. Contentment is, I trained for 28 weeks for this fight and now it's done. And I've raised 140 grand for charity and I've knocked him out in the second fucking round, because that's what I'm going to do. That's contentment. Contentment isn't not taking the fight in the first place. So I think people misunderstand happiness emotions. Basically, easy now, hard later. Hard now, easy later.
Well, yeah, I couldn't have said it much better myself, to be honest. Something I know that you talk about pretty much in all of your podcasts and all of the YouTube videos, freedom of speech. Do we have any?
That's another paradox, because I've asked loads of people about this. And at first, I used to think we don't have freedom of speech. And now I think we do. So
I did have a feeling he was going to say that.
Yeah. I mean, you can say whatever you want. The question is, are you ready for the consequences of what you say or don't say?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, and I think this is disgusting, but someone got arrested at the FA Cup final because on the back of their shirt, they had 97, the number, and not enough above it. And they were referring to the 97 Liverpool fans that died in the Hillsborough disaster. And this was a Manchester fan. I won't say which team because I'm not doing it to criticise. And it's only one human. That person had the freedom to put that on their T-shirt and they got fucking arrested for it. And in my opinion, they deserved to be arrested for that. So he had the freedom to make that shirt and say what he wanted to say. But he has to face the consequences. So I do have the freedom to say whatever I want. The question is, am I prepared to say it or not say it? Because the freedom of speech is not just the freedom to say what I want. It is perceived oppression to not speak out when I should. So,
yeah, go on. No, go on.
So here's what I've learned. If I want a YouTube channel that doesn't keep getting shut down, there's certain phrases. Harry is head producer. So if we talk about lockdowns or COVID, or we interview David Icke or Andrew Tate, we are flirting with YouTube shadow banning or giving us a 7-day ban or cancelling us. But we know that now. Well, we didn't know it at the start. Mm-hmm. And sometimes to know the line, you have to cross the line. So we do have freedom of speech because we can choose not to say it. Mm-hmm. And if we go, oh, well, fuck YouTube, we're just going to say it anyway. Well, this is YouTube's platform. This is your studio I've come into. So I've got freedom to start criticising you, but this is your studio. You've invited me in. So I'm an idiot if I start criticising you in your studio. So I have changed my tune. I do feel like YouTube and social media, they should give us a bit more freedom to speak, but also it's their platform and their rules. And that's okay. And if I don't like their rules, I can go on Rumble or Getter or some other platform, or I can create my own platform. For me, freedom of speech is being able to express your opinion to the point where it isn't detrimental to others. But defining detrimental to others is really difficult.
As long as you stay within the boundaries, I think, as you've already said, excuse me, and it's not going to harm anyone, it's not racist, for example, as you've already mentioned, I think it's fine. And if you stay within the rules of whichever platform you're on, then you should be fine. But again, what is political correctness? You've asked this question before, and I think it was David Icke. I'd be interested to get your take on this.
I have a very healthy skepticism towards politics and media. Mm. And I believe there are hidden agendas in politics, whether it is an individual who's a careerist and they're more interested in their own career than they are being a civil and public servant, or whether there's strings being pulled behind the scenes of governments and organisations. I'm sure there are very powerful people who control politics and policy much more than politicians. But I don't really know who's pulling those strings, and I've asked a lot of people and no one's given me any names. So no one really knows. But so a system that I believe is not good enough for the people and is not a public servant enough, which is what it is at the moment. In that regard, being politically correct to me doesn't even register as a thing. I think media has a lot to play with it, because, being politically correct could mean being careful with what you say so the media don't come for you. Mm-hmm. So it's actually not political. It's media driven. And it could be for a news story. So Philip Schofield. It seems like I have a relatively controversial view on this, which surprises me greatly. Here's my view. As we speak, and this could change, so I'll caveat it, but as we speak, the young man that Philip Schofield had an affair with wasn't underage and has no grievance towards Philip Schofield. If that's the case, fuck off and leave him alone. Because what's he done wrong? The young man is either legal or illegal of age, because that is clear by law. So it's a moral question, not a legal question. Well, it's actually also a contractual question, which I'll get to in a minute. So it's none of my business what your sexuality is and what your intimate personal relationships are. And if I ask you about your personal relationships and you decide you don't want to tell me, or you lie to me about it, that's your prerogative, because it's your private life. And the media want to cancel him because they're vultures, because they want to suck a story to sell relevance when they're dying. BBC are dying, and they will happily force Philip Schofield into maybe committing suicide because there's red flags there that this guy is suicidal, and they don't give a fuck based on his private life, which is private. Well, apparently all of his colleagues and his employers, he lied to them. Everyone lies every fucking day. If you ask me a question about my private life I don't want to answer, I will fucking lie to you, because it's my private life. Fuck off and leave him alone. He's a human who's being publicly hung, drawn, quartered and stoned. And it's really wrong. And that's all happening because the media want a story. And it's politically correct to say, oh, he's a groomer. Well, no one's got any proof that he's a groomer. Now, he met the kid when he was underage. I know people who are married to people who met them when they were underage. Meeting an underage person is not a crime. Now, if it turns out it was underage and it's illegal, that's completely different. But that is not currently the state of play. And I have friends who are very famous who have been hung out to dry by the media by using political correctness, whether it's gender or race or whatever, which, by the way, these are just fucking fads that the media choose to be a fad, a movement. Like the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement, there were nefarious undertones in those movements. And these are just some of the things I think when you trigger me with the words political correctness. What about human correctness? What about, I would love to interview Philip Schofield. Here's what pisses me off. Bullshit dying mainstream media completely biased, non-factual, like the BBC. They get the big scoops, like Philip Schofield and Andrew Tate's first interview out of prison, and they fuck it up. You and I would do 10 times a better job interviewing Philip Schofield and Andrew Tate, because we'd treat him like a human, not a commodity that we want to ruin so we can become more relevant. I would never ruin anyone just to get more relevant in media. No fucking way. In fact, Harry's wants me to interview a couple of guests because he knows we could go viral on it. And I said no, because it doesn't fit well with me. Anyway, it's good to be here.
Mate, carry on as much as you like. It's very interesting to learn from.
What do you think about what I've just said?
I agree.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, you can see by the guests that I've had on, and including yourself, if I don't agree with it, I'll challenge them. And I'm sure you've seen as well, Harry. I won't just sit here and agree if I don't agree. I agree with everything that you have just said regarding Philip Schofield.
Yeah.
But again, if I didn't agree with you, then I will challenge it.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I believe humanity would be in a much better place if we could have agreeable discourse. We could disagreeably agree and agreeably disagree. Mm-hmm. Progress comes through discussion, debate, argument, disagreement. Mm-hmm. And the problem with the world now is if you don't agree with me, I don't like you. Fuck off. Oh, wait a minute. I want to cancel you because you don't agree with me. That is mostly what's wrong with the world. Whereas if we can have challenging discussion and debate and respectfully and politely disagree, and if you change my mind, I can move my ego away and go, no, I actually agree with you on that. You've changed my mind. And if you don't, I still stick to my own volition. I think the world will be a much better place. But for some reason, humans find that really hard to do.
Because they've got a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah, or an ulterior motive.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That is true. So how can we change it?
Basically, know that your worldview is just your worldview. It's one of 7 billion worldviews. It is not better or worse or right or wronger than anyone else's worldview. So respect other people's worldview as well. And if you want to progress in life, engage in challenging debate, challenge other people's worldviews with things you believe in, and allow your worldviews to be challenged by others. And don't judge the person, judge the discussion.
Solid advice. So there's AI. I just wanted to jump onto that quickly. Something I'm not familiar with, and I'm obviously going to be open, not going to be familiar with it just yet. There's a lot of artificial intelligence talk that's been thrown around. I don't know if you are. It's something I want to talk to you about. What is it? What does it mean to you?
Well, artificial intelligence is...
Or what opportunities do you see coming from artificial intelligence?
Oh, it paradoxically, it could be the greatest advancement of humanity, and it could be the thing that triggers our extinction. Because I've talked to a lot of people about this, including experts in this. We've had experts on the show about this, and it seems that we are at the point now of no return of the journey towards AI. So AI is already far quicker and has greater data capacity and problem-solving capacity and speed. I guess the only thing that it isn't yet is sentient and or conscious. So what advancements could we have? Life longevity, the continual increase of information. It can make our lives easier, faster, better in virtually every way.
Replacement of jobs?
Yeah, but all technological advancements make our lives easier and better, and the downside consequence of that is there are less jobs. Like how many people worked in the factories before you had the more automated factory line. Having a new technology replace jobs is not a new thing. It happens through history. What I would say to someone who might be scared of losing their job is learn a new skill. Because there's lots of new skills that AI will spin off that could create jobs equally to people losing jobs.
That being in a form of content, producing content a lot quicker.
Well, think about every day, right? Every day, Harry and I get multiple emails from people pitching us to turn our long form content into short form content. So basically editors who take your podcast and your YouTube and turn it into YouTube shorts and TikToks and etc. 3 years ago, I would get none of them. And now we get, multiples a day. So that's a new job that didn't exist. And that can be done from your bedroom or your living room or on your laptop. Audio editing of podcasts now, because there's a lot more. We're going to 3 studios today. So you and 2 other people have your own studio. So you have your own studio. You need lighting. You need videographers. Social media agencies and growth agencies and trying to grow your own social media. And there's new ad platforms out all the time. There's always new, evolving, emerging jobs and markets. And actually, if you get in there at the early adopter phase, you can get in there where there's high margin and low competition. So with AI, it could be a great opportunity for high margin and low competition. Like if I wanted to get into AI, I'd find out all the long form content that people are struggling with, and I'd get them to pay me to help them do it. And I'd use AI to help create. So if someone was struggling writing a book, they could hire me as a researcher and I'd use AI for 80% of the research. So I could almost just become a broker of AI. So there's lots of great opportunity, but Terminator and Skynet and these Darwinian sci-fi films where technology makes us extinct and turns against us, that is more real than it's ever been.
And again, we're going to touch on the social media stuff now. I get this all of the time, people coming up to me, they say, Lewis, you look quite relaxed in your podcast, you seem quite raw, relevant, and that's something that I can resonate with yourself with. Passionate, again, you got very passionate there about when we talked about politics, or you spoke about politics. How do we get over this fear, or how do people get over this fear of being judged? Especially on the social, this facade that people appear to put up.
Okay, right, so.
Don't trigger again.
I might go on this one. No, this one's closer to my own emotions, in that for most of my life I've struggled with and worried about being judged. So the first thing is appreciating what emotions are. So if you experience a negative emotion, you have labeled that as negative, but it's only because it doesn't feel good that we label it negative. But if there was an imminent threat to your life right now, would you want to experience a positive or a negative emotion? That's a question to you.
Positive.
Would you? So you'd want to feel happy and relaxed knowing that someone out there is about to come in with a machete? Or would you want to feel scared and on edge?
Depends if I knew it was coming.
Okay. Well, I'm going to argue this then. I'm going to answer this for you. I believe that in a stressful situation where your survival was at stake, what we perceive to be negative emotions, stress with cortisol flying around your body, is a more useful emotion.
The only reason, because I've been in situations whereby my previous job, the company that I own, being a bailiff, you're in very high stressful situations.
Yeah.
Knowing I'm going into that stressful situation, if I was, like you say, having them feelings, you can't do that job properly.
No. Okay, so someone comes in with a knife machete right now.
That's a negative.
Yeah. Basically, so my point is, that's actually not a negative emotion.
No.
To be on edge and stressed and scared, and therefore more strength in your body.
Yeah.
Your quicker reactions is a good thing. So every emotion we perceive to be negative actually isn't negative. We just perceive it to be negative. Every emotion has a purpose. So another example would be shame. Shame is very motivating an emotion to get you to change. Yeah. Guilt, that is a good measure of, oh, I shouldn't behave like that in the future because I feel bad having done that before. So guilt's good feedback. Shame can be a very motivating emotion. So first off, understand that all emotions aren't good or bad. They're just all functional and useful. And understanding what their purpose is. So, therefore, what is the useful functional purpose of feeling like you're being judged? To make sure that you can fit within a community, a hierarchy, and a society without getting yourself ostracized. Because if you didn't worry about being judged by anyone, if I didn't, I don't worry too much about being judged by you, but I would like to think that when I leave here, you've got something useful from me and it's been worth your time. And if I didn't have that concern, I wouldn't make the effort. I'd be, all right, fuck you. Yeah, gotta go. We're going to be late to the next one. Yeah. So having that, not fear of, but awareness of being judged is useful. I'm doing a talk at Michaela School, which is a very disruptive school for very high achieving young kids from underprivileged backgrounds. And I'm more nervous about than I am any normal talks. And you could say, well, why? They're only a bunch of kids. Well, because I want to make a good impression. And I want to impact these kids' life in a really positive way. So I'm nervous, or at least I'm like, I've got to do a good job. And what does that make me do? Makes me do better research, makes me practice my talk, etc. So having a feeling that you are being judged is useful to keep you useful within your society. But it's when it gets to the point where it debilitates you, it freezes you, or it stops you putting your content out to the world, or it makes you play small. And so to answer that, I would simply say, you're being judged anyway. Like, you're judging me anyway. And you're either going to have, Rob was better than I thought, Rob was different than I thought, or Rob was not as good as I thought, or that part was good and that part wasn't so good. And I can't control that.
You're different than what I thought you'd be.
So I can't control that.
I'm honest.
Yeah. So why should I even be worried about how you're judging me? Because you're judging me through your own filters. How you're judging me is none of my business. It's nothing to do with me. Because I am being me. You're just judging me based on your own life experiences and your own initial perceptions of me. And, I would like, as a soft, warm, cuddly, ex-fat person, that those judgments are positive, but I'm okay with them being negative. So people will judge you anyway. And it's none of your business about how they judge you. So if I'm comfortable with who I am, doesn't matter how you judge me. If I'm not comfortable with who I am, I might be concerned about how you judge me, and I might want you to judge me positively so that I feel better about myself. So the greatest gift you can give to yourself when you're worried about being judged is by appreciating you for who you are.
And what steps does someone need to take in order to get to where they are or where you are today, but for that individual, if they've not even taken the first initial step to start working on themselves? Because it's a long road if they've not posted that first piece of content, but they're stuck behind that camera and they're just froze, like you've just mentioned there. You've recently done a talk at Peak Performance, which is it's hard for people to post that first piece of content, but sometimes they just got to get out their own way. What would your advice be to that person?
Again, it depends on the person. So if you're worried about the response to your content, I would say the same thing. Your content's going to be judged anyway, so you might as well just put it out. I would also say that your first piece of content or your next piece of content can't be as good as your 100th or your 1000th piece, because you're going to improve. So the sooner you start, the better you get. I greatly admire Ed Sheeran, and he said that if you want to write a good song, you have to write a lot of shit songs. And so in me training for this fight, I have to have a lot of shit sparring sessions. I have to do a lot of circuits in the early days where, I mean, we couldn't even do 10 burpees, could we, before we even started? And, you know, now we smash out rounds and rounds and rounds of them. Couldn't even go 1 minute sparring without gassing out. And I think I did 10 3-minute rounds yesterday. No problem. Every winner was once a beginner. Every master was once a disaster. But ultimately, if someone is worried or not putting themselves out there, it's usually something to do with how it will be judged. And I think the best way to overcome how something will be judged is to make sure that you do what you can to be okay with yourself. So Harry and I, in the last sort of couple of weeks, some of our content's not gone that viral, but I like the content, so I don't give a fuck. And I honestly don't. But if I don't really love the content and it's not doing that well, that bothers me. So now I'm going to try and have this rule, which is, as long as I like the content that I'm doing, if it doesn't go viral, well, it's on them, it's not on me. I just want to know that I'm doing good work.
And I know you're big on time, and if someone gives you an excuse that they haven't got the time to do it, that would I be right in saying that is a trigger for yourself? Do you think?
I mean, we were late today. You didn't hear me making an excuse. No. Didn't say a word. And you were asking about traffic. I didn't say a word. And if you'd have asked me, I'd have said we didn't set off early enough.
Do you think your diary is a true reflection of your happiness?
I've never been asked that question, but I'd have to say the answer is no, because sometimes there are things in my diary that I know I have to do that I don't necessarily want to do. But if I want to progress in my life, there's things that I have to do that I don't necessarily want to do. But I did write a book called Routine Equals Results. And I have explained to people very clearly that if you master your diary, you will have more mastery over your life. And so I'm very careful about what I put in my diary. But the reality of time is, you are a master of your own time. And if you're late, that's on you, even if it's not. I didn't fill up the car with petrol, and I left Harry with a car empty full of petrol, so we had to take a detour to get the petrol. I hadn't got my coffee in the morning because he picked me up at 6 a.m. and I had to get my coffee. And even though Harry thought he'd set up with enough time, I know when you go to London, it can take 2 hours, but it can sometimes take 3. And so it was me that made us late. Harry was just driving the car, and if you'd have said anything to me about that, I'd have said the truth, not bullshit. And I try my best not to be late. Sometimes it happens, it's life. But if you waste your time, or you do low value tasks, or you make excuses for where all the time goes, or you don't do things because you believe or you convince yourself that you don't have time, you don't understand what your own life priorities are. And when you understand what your life priorities are, all of a sudden, you will make time for the high priorities. Because actually, we're all making time for the things that are of priority to us. You're not kicking me out of here, which means you're making this a priority. And he's itching because we've got another interview, and I know that. But I'm not rushing to get out of here because I want to make up for the fact that we were 15 minutes late. So we're both making this a priority. And we've chosen to do that. And therefore, we've chosen that everything else is not as high a priority. So the key for people is to be conscious of what your highest priorities are. And then you make the time. So you're a well-built guy. You've got some good muscles. I know you've been in the gym. And there's been loads of times when you've not felt like going to the gym, but you make it a priority because your health and the way you look and your strength is important to you. And Harry and I will train in tiny little hotel rooms, or we'll train on this street because we've got a fight in 4 weeks. I will train in my pants in that street as I haven't got my gym kit because I've got a fight in 4 weeks because I make it a priority.
My gym bag was out there. You walked past it. Yeah. I have to.
So there you go. So you make it a priority. Mm-hmm. So you keep your gym bag with you and you don't make excuses. So if people want a different result in their life, they need to make different priorities and they need to stop making excuses.
So if you was the last person on earth, what would you be doing?
I'd be trying to find another person on earth. Like, being the last person on earth is actually a really scary, empty, lonely thought to me. Remember, I'm the kid that was very alone when I was young. I would not want to be the last person on earth. I would just spend my whole time trying to find other people. Yeah.
I'll ask you that question because Ollie asked you that as well, and I know it's one of your favourite questions.
Yeah, well, Ollie Ollerton is a great guy, and he asks himself this question: what would I do if I were the last person on earth? And what he means by that is, what would I do if I knew there was no one there to judge me? And I think that's a great question. It's just that I would be lonely.
Who wouldn't? It's not just you.
Well, I bet Harry would probably like it. Harry doesn't like most humans. Our coach doesn't like humans. Some people are not really, no. Like, I know people who just would want a dog, and that would be enough for them. But for me, I need other humans.
I completely agree. I mean, we haven't scratched the surface on Progressive, your property portfolio. There's so much that we could touch on. Guys, you're going to have to go over to the website. I mean, how many episodes now?
Of my podcast,
Yeah.
Disruptors.
Yeah.
Nearly 1,000. It's coming up to 1,000.
Between the two shows, it's over 1,000.
Yeah. Oh, well, because I have a podcast called Money as well. It must be nearly 1,300 between the two.
So
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't even touched on the podcast either. There's some amazing guests on there that you just go and have a look, subscribe to the YouTube channel. But like you've already mentioned, you've got the fight coming up. Just talk us through that. What's going on? Who's it with? And obviously you've been talking about the lead up to that. You've lost 9 kilograms now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wasn't, if anyone knows what I look like now, you can see I wouldn't have been overweight with 9 kilos more. I didn't try and lose weight. I just trained hard. So in 4 weeks, I'm fighting Samuel Leeds, who's another guy who's got a property training business. And he called me out for a fight live on a podcast, and I accepted, and I bet him 50 grand, and then he upped it to 100 grand. It's at the Brentwood Centre in Essex. I think the tickets are sold out now. Moore v Leeds is the website. If I'm sure the odd person won't turn up. I'm sure someone could squeeze in. The reason I accepted was because it was a new challenge. Subconsciously, I was ready because I wasn't focusing on my health and fitness as much as I should have been. And I'm 44 now, so I felt like I needed to get control of that back. And that felt like a really good way to do that. And that's definitely proven to be true. Also, I wanted to raise a good lump of money for charity. Some people say, oh, well, you shouldn't be fighting. Why don't you just get him to give you the money? He's not going to give me the money. I'm going to have to knock it out of him. If I said to you, oh, give me 100 grand for my foundation, you're going to say no. If I challenged you to a charity boxing match and we sold 1,700 tickets and we had a bet, you're going to do it. I've not had a boxing match before, so I wanted to challenge myself on that. And I also wanted to see what it would be like to do. Because, you've got people like Jake Paul who've, I'm not going to make a living out of this. This is just a one-off. But, people have made a big living out of it. And, I wanted to see what it was like to have a bit of beef, because I've got a natural bit of beef with the guy. He's a lot heavier than me, and he's very mouthy, good at the hype and the spin. And I thought it might be nice to have a duel with him in that regard. So, yeah. On July the 1st, I knock out Samuel Leeds.
Fantastic, mate. Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you?
My name is Rob Moore, so search me online. You'll find me anywhere. My podcast is Disruptors, and I'm on all social media, written a load of books.
Yeah, and obviously if you haven't signed up already, go to robmore.team, and you won't be disappointed. Thank you very much, mate.
Thanks, Lewis. Can I just ask you one question before we leave?
Of course.
You said your perception of me, your judgment of me is different.
As to social media.
Yeah, so what was your initial perception and what is your now perception? I just find this fascinating. I'm not looking...
No, it's obviously we're still running.
To be loved. But...
No, it's the professional image that you give off, and the... what's the best way to put it? Well, the image that's given off on social media, the salesman, the person that you are seen as on social media, but then the warm side of you that's come out today, I think it's rare to see, or it's not seen as on social media and YouTube. And I think more people need to see it.
Well, thank you for the feedback. I think social media is part of the problem of that because I actually much prefer long form content. And I would way rather do 90 minutes than 90 seconds, even though 90 minutes takes a lot longer. Because I think it's very easy to not be honest in a piece of 90-second content.
Of course it is.
Because of the editing and the short form nature. But it's very difficult to lie and be dishonest on a 90-minute piece of content because you really get to know someone and how they are. So I think social media is part of the problem and the desire for short form. And I am a champion of long form content, which is why Harry has taken me to do 3 interviews and which is why we're not rushing about and which is why we're staying here for 90 minutes.
Absolutely.
Although we better get the fuck out of here, hadn't we, mate?
So I'm glad that.
Yeah, because we've got to go via Costa Coffee. Yeah, that is a non-negotiable.
Brilliant.
Lewis, thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.